Hey there, everyone. This is Erica Haake, and you're listening to KSDB 91.9, and you are currently listening to our roundtable. We are covering a very controversial topic that's been going on that needs to be touched about, and we're going to talk about sexual assault tonight. So tonight with me, I have a member from the Riley County Police Department and a member from the C.A.R.E Center. So if you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourself, feel free.
So my name is Caitlin Carrington, and I'm the new coordinator with the C.A.R.E office.
Cool.
And I'm Josh Kyle. I'm captain with the Riley County Police Department.
Awesome. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So one of our first topics that we want to talk about tonight is it is said 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men will be sexually assaulted while they are in college. Do you have anything you can elaborate on with those statistics? Like, if you are affected by this, or if you know someone, how can you help them out and lead them into the right direction? Like, yeah.
So the C.A.R.E office has a number of resources available for students and faculty members of K-State who are affected by this. So we offer confidential advocacy, and basically what that means is we just let the students know of all of their options in terms of reporting as well as receiving counseling services. So a lot of times people will come in and they don't necessarily want to report. They just want to get themselves taken care of. So we have a therapy fund where we can send people to free psychological or emotional well-being counseling sessions.
That's awesome. Good.
Yeah, and that's a great point. That's a great point, talking about advocacy and not necessarily having to file a police report. I know a number of people who have contacted advocacy groups, reported to them, got resources available to them, and even going so far as getting a medical exam at the hospital, even an evidentiary exam, without reporting to the police. So there's a lot of things you could do besides just calling the police and filing a police report.
That's really good to know, because I think a lot of people out there think either you have one choice, you go talk to a counselor, or you go talk to the police department. So it's great to know all about that. How common is it to come across someone who's been a victim of sexual assault between someone that they're comfortable with and they've known for a while, or they've been around a while with? Do you guys have any elaboration on that?
I'd say that's the overwhelming majority of the cases that we see are between people that are acquainted with each other. Stranger rape does occur. However, at least in our experience locally in the Manhattan area, it is fairly rare. It is very obviously traumatic to the victim when it occurs, and very serious crime that we investigate when it occurs. But the overwhelming majority of the sexual assault cases that we deal with are between people that are associated with each other.
Okay. And I would say that's especially true on college campuses. So a lot of times students will be reporting that they have been a victim of sexual assault by a classmate or an acquaintance or someone even that they've been really good friends with. And also a lot of times in dating relationships, there can be issues with sexual assault as well, even in people who are in a romantic relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So how often, I'm curious personally, is it that a friend reaches forward for someone else and talks to you? Is that an often thing? Or is it the actual person who's been through the sexual offense that comes to contact you first? Because I feel like some people, they have their close friend that they go to, and a relative, like friend, anyone will contact. Does that ever happen?
I would say based on my experience that it just depends. It's case by case, because there are instances where sometimes a victim will experience something and they may not even understand that they've been assaulted. So a lot of times what we see is people aren't necessarily coming to resources like ours first. They're going to their close friends. So a lot of times, like, how that person responds to them will dictate the rest of that journey. So that's why I always say that it's really important to start by believing if somebody does disclose to you, because they need to know that what they experience is valid, and that that they can trust you to believe in them. And then a lot of times that would lead them to actually seek resources, or sometimes we do have people come in on behalf of a friend or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. Most commonly we're not the first group that the person calls when something happens. Usually they call close family, close friends, talk to them for a while, mull it over, think about it, and then oftentimes the victim will come to the police department with a friend. with them, and so that they're kind of reporting in common.
Yeah.
And I think, sorry, just to add, I think that a lot of times that myth of that stranger rape is most prevalent. So a lot of times people expect if they're going to be assaulted, it's going to be someone in the bushes. And so when they are assaulted in a way that's not often talked about, just by kind of describing a situation, you get a lot of people who are talking to their friends and kind of describing a scenario and like, this happened to me. They don't really feel that great about it. And then their friends are the ones that tell them sort of, it sounds like you've been assaulted. And so that can come as a huge shock to people. So that's why it is very important that whoever that person opens up to first has the proper response to them.
Absolutely. Based off of that, like you said, a lot of people expect it to be some stranger jumping out of the bushes, but a lot of the time it happens to be someone who was close friends with them, and that usually pertains to some sort of consumption of alcohol. How often that it is without alcohol? Like, do you have any statistics on that? Like, whether or not it's more prominent with alcohol and that extra push to do something, or if it's, happens just as often, it's just not talked about as often when there's no alcohol included?
Well, yeah, that's a complicated question. And on the surface, it's pretty straightforward. The majority of the cases that we deal with, and I would say the overwhelming majority of the cases that we deal with, involve alcohol of some sort, sometimes drugs. The common scenario is for two people who know each other in one capacity, another, maybe they're friends, maybe they have a friend in common that's in a relationship with one of them. They get intoxicated, and then there's some kind of encounter. Either they met, and sometimes they just maybe meet that evening, and there's usually some kind of encounter, and then they end up over at somebody's place or apartment, and the next morning are aware of the fact that sexual relations of some sort had occurred without their consent. And so memories tend to be very foggy. It's very difficult to remember portions of what happened in the evening. It's also difficult. There's a guide for prosecutors out there that's called Dealing with Sexual Assault, and alcohol-facilitated sexual assault is what it's referred to. And one of the terms that is often brought up and have to sort through is this issue of regrettable sex. Was this a consensual encounter between two people that was in part facilitated by alcohol?
Yeah.
Or no, was this person incapacitated by alcohol and incapable of giving consent? And it can be quite difficult to sort through that. And there's very important things you have to do in an investigation early on to try to help sort through that as well.
Absolutely. Do you have any input on that? Yeah,
just to sort of echo what Josh was saying, is that it does happen without there being alcohol or drugs to facilitate an assault. However, the majority of cases do involve someone becoming inebriated, and a lot of times perpetrators use alcohol in a very calculated manner. And so what you'll see is a lot of times, even though both parties might be drinking, there's usually sort of a calculated, planned out attempt to get the victim way drunker than the perpetrators to follow through with the act. So, unfortunately, that is the most often the case, is that there will be, and alcohol is the most common drug used to facilitate these sorts of crimes.
Absolutely. Just wanted to give a shout out to all our listeners really quick. If you guys have any questions you would like to ask at this time, we are taking calls at 785-532-0919, or you can tweet at us at KSDB FM. So feel free if you guys have any questions. We have, people here to talk and answer these questions, and we'll try and answer them the best as we can. And so moving on, so K-State University actually has a required sexual assault and domestic violence informational program. And I was curious, so most people go through this program and they take the whole program. Some people just fly through it, not paying attention to what they're doing because they're like, I know it happens. I know what to do in these situations. But how much does this program actually really help out? Like, how much does it inform our people of like how to react in certain situations and how to deal with sexual assault and domestic violence and like alcohol abuse and all this?
I think you might be in a better position to talk about campus, and I'll talk about Fort Riley.
Sure. So based on what I've seen from campus so far is that I think the program is incredibly well-intended. However, this is only my second week working here, and we've already received several emails and phone calls from people trying to get out of the training or giving us reasons why they don't need to take it. And so I think a lot of that, based on my observations is that people think that because they're not a rapist and because they would never do anything like that, that it doesn't apply to them and they don't need to have a training on that because, I would never do that. So why do I even need to talk about it? But the problem with that line of thinking is that it's incumbent on everyone to change the culture that we live in that will make these things less prevalent, because a lot of times if you have a group of people who are saying things that come from a place of sexual violence and nobody else is really telling them that that's wrong, then of course it's going to continue being perpetuated.
Absolutely.
So I would say that unfortunately this is kind of just a lot of people just perceive this as an obstacle and something that they have to do to check the block, and people don't really take it seriously and reflect on how their actions can help change the culture, which is really the ultimate goal.
Okay, so would you say that the program overall does help with the situation if people take it willingly and wanting to learn it? Or would you say since people just view it tediously, if either way, they would still just view it the same way?
I think that if someone were to go into it with an open mind and actually acknowledging that this were a problem and wanting to be a part of the change, then it could be very helpful. But if somebody does have that mindset where it doesn't apply to them, they've never experienced sexual violence, or they don't believe that they'd ever be a perpetrator, then I think it kind of is going to fall on deaf ears. Okay. So I think it does just depend on the individual.
On the person, absolutely. Okay, and then we'll take a really quick break after we hear something about Fort Riley. So what would you say about Fort Riley?
Two parts, Fort Riley and then some community resources. Number one is Fort Riley has very clearly, in my experience in dealing with a couple of sexual assault investigations involving Fort Riley personnel, they have some very strong protocols in place. And it's clear that their personnel are trained. They know exactly what they're supposed to do, who they're supposed to report to. And they have a very strong victim-based advocacy program that they go through as well before they even decide to report to law enforcement. We're oftentimes probably the third or fourth or fifth group that they've talked to before the report is filed. And so kudos to them for doing that.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I would say is I had a conversation with a father of a son that's going to college, and he said, one thing, you got to remember one thing, and that is you do not have sexual relations with somebody who's been drinking, period. And that was the guidance. So parents have a huge role to play in this as well, I think, as far as preventing sexual assaults.
That's fantastic. I love to hear that. I mean, I feel like it's far too often gone past of people take the precautions, but sometimes it happens and it's something to talk about. So we'll continue talking about this after a short break. So keep listening and listen more. If you have any calls, any questions you want to ask, again, call us at 785-532-0919 or tweet us at KSDB FM.
When you purchase the latest TV, tablet, or smartphone,
yeah, what were you worried about? You sound like a pro.
I was gonna say, you know exactly what you're doing.
Consumer Technology Association and its members.
I know. It's like it takes a second because you're going on there, and it's like it's nerve-wracking.
Just type in your zip code, and you'll instantly find the recycling location closest to your home. You'll also find recycling tips, like asking the store where you buy your new TV if they'll haul away your old one. Don't let your old tech tools clog your local mail. Just visit greenergadgets.org.
How that plays.
Was fantastic first 15 minutes or so. If you could get a little bit closer.
Have you ever listened to 91.9 KSDB and think, man, I would love to do that? Well, guess what?
It might be a little bit low. I don't know.
MC 165 is a non-credit class that's available to all K-State students, regardless of year
right up here. Just like
there are many opportunities to get
just
involved
talk up
in
close
music,
to it. It seems
sports,
weird and
news,
awkward,
and promotions. Join your student-run and student-led radio station, 91.9 KSDB. Enroll in MC 165 on K-State today, and we'll see you on the airwaves tomorrow.
When we come back, I can bring that up.
Looking for a resume builder?
Yeah, absolutely.
What about one that can make a difference?
Yeah,
Look no farther.
totally okay
Manhattan
with
has a
that,
Boys and Girls
because I
Club,
think that is
and they
something
serve
that
over
needs to be touched
2,500
about,
youth each year
we're
in
actually
Manhattan
going
and
to,
Wamego. With the help of over
kinda
100
talk
staff
about
just like you,
gender
you're
roles.
great.
impacting
Okay,
kids'
so I'll
lives in
just
the area
hold
of
off
academic
then.
success,
Yeah.
good character, and a healthy lifestyle.
Talk on that
Get involved today as a part-time program leader or volunteer. It's not only a resume builder, it's a heartwarming job that can make a difference in one child's life. Visit bgclubmanhattan.com or follow us on Facebook at BG Club Manhattan today.
Yeah, I feel like...
Okay. Alrighty, hi everybody, we're back and we're here to talk a little bit more about sexual assault on campus and just in general. So bringing it back to the topic, we just wanted to talk about, if you have any questions, call in our line at 785-532-0919, again, or tweet at us at KSDB FM. But we were just going to talk a little bit about how gender roles and like gender stereotypes play a role in how sexual assault is like reacted to and handled in these situations. Because, I mean, you hear more often that it happens to women than you do hear it happening to men. And you hear also if a man says, hey, I've been sexually assaulted, I've been harmed in some sort of way, like, I feel like it's viewed differently as like a weakness of how did you let that happen to you versus if a woman does it, everyone's like, oh my gosh. So like if you could elaborate on those situations.
So I think based on my experience, we do see the overwhelming number of perpetrators are males assaulting women. And so I think that speaks to the fact that this is essentially gender-based violence, and that, and when I talk about culture, it's the entire way that our culture sort of views women and also sexuality as well as masculinity. It's all kind of makes this lovely cocktail where we have a lot of instances of sexual assault as well as just kind of general misogyny. And so I think it's we could sit here all night and talk about it, but essentially I think that one thing that we're doing in the CARE office to sort of help combat this is having a forum for men to talk about masculinity and certain aspects of it that may be toxic in this sphere. And because I think that based on my experience talking with men is that sometimes they feel alienated from the conversation because the research shows that it's not that there's a lot of men going around raping people, it's that the ones who are doing it over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of men that I've talked to feel that because they would never do something like that they don't really want to talk about it because they don't feel that it's their place to really speak on. But what we do see a lot of is men not checking their friends. So if men have a group of friends who are doing things that are not okay and sort of leading to this culture of misogyny and they're not saying anything about it, then they're sort of being implicit in these sorts of things happening. So I think it's a long-winded way of basically saying that I do think there does need to be men exactly, and men sort of men are part of the solution. They're not the problem. That's Absolutely. What I always like to say, because we need everyone to help solve this problem. And I also think that it is definitely unfortunate that a lot of men don't feel as if they can report, because a lot of times if men come forward with the fact that they've been assaulted by a woman, which can certainly happen, it's kind of met with a level of absurdity because of this idea that men are hypersexualized and want sex all the time. So how could you be assaulted by
Absolutely.
A woman when that's not true at all? It's a very false stereotype. So I think just sort of breaking those things down and having a place where men can feel engaged with the discussion, I think would do a lot to sort of combat this issue. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a series of cases, it's been a while back now, but where a group of men were sexually assaulted, and the scenario was very familiar to what a woman would experience. Went to an area bar district, had some fun, drank, was with my friends, lost track of my friends, and then suddenly woke up someplace I was not familiar with, and somebody was having sexual relations with me that I remember bits and pieces of, but I really don't know this person, and I don't think that was okay. In this case, it was men saying that. And I think for men, we know that sexual assault is grossly underreported. Mm-hmm. You look at the number of police reports are filed and the number of people who report on surveys being victims of sexual assault, the numbers do not match up. So whatever we talk about here, we know that the underreporting is significant. My guess is with men, it's even more so. Absolutely. So a lot of men are probably not liking the masculinity. You're supposed to be a man. You're supposed to be in control. You're supposed to be able to fight somebody off. And you probably don't expect to go to a bar, get drunk, have some other dude say, hey, let's go to my house and get drink, do some more drinking. And you're like, sure, you're not even thinking that that's even a possibility. So I'll probably take fewer precautions or even think about that. And therefore it becomes harder for them to report.
Yeah. And I think too, part of the issue, at least, and things that I've read and seen, is that sometimes for men and women, actually, there is an extra layer of difficulty and complexity to the issue, because and I think sometimes, especially in the case of men, just due to like anatomy, sometimes your body can sort of give you away in situations like this, meaning that you may not mentally want to engage in a certain behavior, but because of certain biological responses, there might be a different story. And so I think that can really trip a lot of people up and affect a lot of people's willingness to report. And I think it's important for people to know that if you were giving signs or saying that you didn't want something to happen, then you're not at fault for it, essentially.
So how often, since it happens and it doesn't happen as often as you hear from women, if you think men spoke up more about it, do you think statistically speaking that there would be a lower ratio for men? For women, it's 1 in 4 women, but for men, if they spoke up more, do you think the ratio would be 1 in 8, 1 in 10? Do you think it'd go down at all?
I don't think it would change a whole lot. The way the national government does it is they combine all the reports that are filed by police, and we report through an incident-based system, and then they also do a victimization survey. And if you use the same system for both men and women and assume that they're telling the truth at the same rate, you're probably going to end up with the similar results. And so I wouldn't dispute the 1 in 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I was going to say, because I feel like that would be an interesting thing to kind of read up on, because it is less prominent for men to actually speak up than it is women, because it's harder. I feel like it's a hard topic altogether to speak up on, but
it would be interesting to compare victimization rates to police reports filed. That might be interesting to see if the ratio is the same. That might be very different.
Absolutely. So if someone was having a friend or a family member, if they were sexually assaulted in any way, what can they do? Do you have any tips how to cope with it? How to go about if they want to file a report? Just anything to help lighten that person's burden. Do you have any tips?
I would say if someone, is sort of what I mentioned before, if somebody does disclose to you that they've been a victim of something like this, it's very important for you to believe them and just take them at their word. And I also would encourage people to not try and make decisions for the victim, because they've already been in a situation where their autonomy has been taken away. So you want to empower them to make their own decisions. So if somebody comes to you, you start by believing, and then make sure that they feel empowered to make the decision that's best for them, whether that's reporting to law enforcement or seeking advocacy services or doing nothing at all, because sometimes people don't want to do something like that, and that's entirely their choice. So I would just say those things, as well as recognizing that I feel like a lot of times in our culture we have this idea of a perfect victim, meaning that we want sexual assault victims to have been sober and a virgin and wearing a tracksuit and all of these sorts of things. So don't attack the person's story. So if a person is telling you what's happened, a lot of times when someone's brain is on trauma, it's not going to be linear. It's going to be kind of all over the place and sort of pieced together as they're going. So it's definitely important that you just listen and not try to doubt them or anything like that, because I always tell people that if somebody told you that they were burgled, your initial response isn't going to say that you don't believe them. So understanding that it's, as a friend, it's your job to believe them, and then there will be an investigative process for a reason, like with every other crime.
Absolutely.
So.
My advice is to be neutral and supportive. Yeah. I agree with that. You can't report for the person, and if you try, it usually doesn't go very well.
Yeah.
We've seen some of that, and so I would agree. Be supportive and neutral.
Okay, cool. And then, so as prevalent as Title IX is, many students admit they don't fully understand it. Is there any important aspects of this that we're missing? And how can we apply this Title IX? But how do you see these students, and how do they think of, how do you think these apply to students in the university?
Okay, I can talk about Title IX because it's been a topic at the police department for a couple of different reasons. And essentially, we're getting to the point, we're moving closer to having a memorandum of understanding with the Title IX office. And essentially, their investigation, a police criminal investigation takes place. Usually wants to go first. So let's say a victim comes forward, communicates with police that they've been a victim. First thing that happens is, of course, we conduct a criminal investigation, we get the facts, we get the evidence, and we conduct interviews. Title IX then, at some point, is notified in a couple of circumstances, generally speaking, if it involves a university student. And then I'm not talking about anything that happened on campus. On campus, that's KSUPD, and it's a whole nother process in and of itself. But the important part is that there's a couple of different investigations going on, and the person that's the victim can choose to report to the police department and not report to Title IX. They can report to Title IX and not report to the police department. Just because you've done one doesn't mean you automatically have to do the other. But the memorandum of understanding is in place so that we ensure that the Title IX office is aware of sexual assaults involving students to see if they're having any on-campus harassment. And that's the key part of Title IX, because on one hand, you want to ask, if an incident occurs off campus, even if both people are students, then how does Title IX get involved? Well, Title IX is to ensure that people can get an education free of harassment. And it's very common for people to communicate on campus in an on-campus setting, either during classroom or during social media. I mean, just about everything that happens on a university is occurring socially on social media. So you can imagine if an incident occurs off campus, there certainly can be harassment taking place on campus. So that's why that Title IX part is so important. It's to protect students from that on-campus harassment.
Okay, cool. Do you have anything about Title IX or?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up pretty perfectly. So
okay.
Don't want to beat a dead horse.
Well, no, I totally get that. So Title IX, I know a lot of listeners probably don't really understand exactly what it is. I know it was in the sexual assault thing that everyone has to take. Is there any way that people can kind of try and understand it more and better? Just because I know some people think it's confusing and they think basically you can go to a counselor or you can go to the police department in these situations.
Well, the best advice I have is anybody that has an office now has a website. So, of course, you can get information on the website. Vet anything that I say, because I'm not a Title IX expert. I'm a cop, so I'm aware of it through some of the investigations that we've been involved with. But other than that, the Title IX office, from my basic understanding, is to protect students from harassment. And again, you can report straight to that office and not to the police. You can report to the police and not to that office. Because if you think about it, you can have a sexual assault without any harassment occurring on campus.
Absolutely.
You can have harassment on campus that's going on without any kind of a sexual assault off campus. So the two are connected to each other, but they're one is not automatically tied to the other. And the person who's the victim has a lot of control about that as well.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, I appreciate that. We're going to cut to a break. Again, if you have any questions, call us at 785-532-0919. We're gladly taking any questions, and we'll try to answer them as best as we can. Or you can also tweet at us at KSDB FM. Cool. Good job.
Have you ever thought about traveling abroad? Do you want to meet people from around the world? Are you interested in learning a new language? If you said yes to any of these, then study abroad is meant for you.
Did you want any water,
there are many benefits to studying abroad, including enhancing your resume and learning about yourself. The Study Abroad office has programs in over 85 countries. Cost varies greatly depending on your location, and most of the classes are taught in English.
Covered that. Yeah.
If you're interested in studying abroad, come visit our office at 304 Fairchild Hall.
Cool. Sounds
you
good.
can also find more information on our website, ksu.edu/studyabroad.
Yeah,
come discover the world and discover yourself.
Because we've tried to talk.
Every year, college and university students on and off campus experience hundreds of fire-related emergencies. These fires can be caused by anything from cooking accidents to overloaded power strips. But overall, most college-related fires are due to lack of fire safety knowledge and prevention. For more information, you can visit usfa.fema.gov/citizens.
It's important.
Every 2 seconds, someone needs blood. Whether it's a natural disaster or one single child suffering from illness, the American Red Cross stands ready to supply blood when it's most needed. But blood is a perishable product. Therefore, it must continuously be replenished. You can safely donate blood every 56 days. The need is constant and patients are waiting. Call your American Red Cross at 1-800-GIVE-LIFE to schedule your life-saving appointment. Please give blood today. Patients are depending on you.
All right. Hi, everybody. We're back again with the round table on sexual assault. Again, we're taking calls at 785-532-0919, or we're also taking tweets. So if you want to tweet at us, we're at KSDB FM. So shoot us your questions, and we'll try and get them answered as best as we possibly can. So jumping back into things, we've already talked about where it usually, sexual assault usually happens. Are there certain places typically where you should avoid, or where sexual assault happens more prominently in Manhattan that you know of?
No, and you kind of have to be a little bit careful with that. I mean, Manhattan is a low crime community, especially a low violent crime community, and we like to keep it that way. Yeah. So fortunately, we do not have a huge problem with stranger sexual assaults. And also you have to be very careful, too, because you can teeter very quickly on victim blaming if you're not very careful. There really should not be any time of day or any place where a person should not feel safe and secure in going to and saying, well, why were you in this area? In fact, a lot of times when it comes to education, people like myself are often blamed for victim blaming, for blaming the victim for being in a certain place in a certain time. But I would not say that there's any particular place that I'm concerned
everywhere.
about. Yeah, it's something that can happen in a lot of different places. It's very rare. Again, stranger sexual assault's very, very rare, fortunately, in Manhattan, and there's not any particular place that I'm of any concern about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just kind of going back to what we said before, given the fact that most assaults do take place between people who know each other, at least in somewhat. So we're looking at residence halls, people's homes, things like that. A lot of times are where you're going to see these crimes occurring.
Okay, cool. I kind of could agree with that, as it happens, and it's never known where it'll happen. It does, though. In terms of social gatherings with, like, alcohol, what are ways that people can help, like, prevent sexual assault? Like, let's say you're at a party, everyone's under the influence, no one's thinking in the right mind. How can someone of being under the influence try and prevent something, even if they're not quite there?
Well, if it was up to me, what I would do is I would have really good friends that I'm with, and even as a 40-something police commander. If I'm going to go out with people and drink alcohol, I generally have some sort of a plan, a really basic plan. I know who's going to drive. So that way nobody, not myself or anybody I know, is going to get in trouble. I have a plan for driving. I have a general idea how much I'm going to drink, and I have a general idea where I'm going to go and who I'm going to be with. So I try to be very careful personally to make certain, and I'm doing it for slightly different reasons. I'm doing it so that nobody gets in trouble that I work with, so that I don't get in trouble, embarrass myself, or embarrass the police department, and that I'm not in a position where I'm being seen by people who may be offended by any kind of behavior that occurs when people are drinking. You know, I'm around people that I trust and not going to dare me to do something stupid when I've been drinking. So I would suggest that those same things would probably apply to any person, regardless of sex or your situation. Is who are you going with? Do you trust them? Do you know them? Enough? Do you make a promise to each other that you're not going to separate and you end up by yourself? I think the people, and I say that gender neutrally, the people that I see that are most vulnerable are the people who consume a tremendous amount of alcohol, who lose track of their friends and end up meeting somebody that night, or somebody they don't know extremely well, and then they end up putting their trust in that person, and then things don't go well.
Okay.
I would say so definitely everything that Josh said in terms of going out with a group of people and making sure that you're with people that you trust. And also for other people who might be at a gathering, I would say for everyone to just sort of use common sense and listen to your gut. So if you observe a situation and it doesn't feel right to you and you feel like something nefarious is going to go on, I would say it's always better to step in and say something or try to do something rather than what could potentially occur. And so everyone can be a bystander, and not regardless of how outgoing you are. So I would say everyone can use their own strength. So if you're a very confrontational person, maybe you feel comfortable just walking up to a potential perpetrator and saying, hey, this isn't okay. Or if you're a little bit more passive, maybe you come up with a distraction or something like that. Or you just go to the potential victim and ask them, are you okay? Do you need help? Can I do anything for you? So I would say just people being active and just sort of thinking about, even if you don't know the person, if it were your friend and you saw them in that situation, how would you feel?
Yeah, just always being aware of what's going on around
you.
Absolutely.
And one specific I could give is if you, one of the things that we do when we tell police officers is if you find a woman alone who's unconscious, that is not okay. You've got to deal with that immediately. That's something you've got to stop what you're doing. I don't care if it's the middle of 2 o'clock in the morning when we're the busiest we are. Stop. We've got to figure out what's going on here and get this person the help that they need. And if they start being picked up by somebody and taken somewhere, we got to know who those people are.
Absolutely. That's a good way to look at it. I think everyone should kind of have that same mindset too, is like, hey, if you find someone under a situation that looks bad, help out.
And picking them up and putting them into a back bedroom is not helping.
It's not helping out. Not helping out at all. No. One of the last questions we actually have of the night has to do with the Greek community, and usually they have taken a lot of blame for these sexual assaults happening, and I'm just kind of curious on, is this really true, or is it the fact that, social media explains it more just from the Greek community side, or would you say it happens more in the Greek community, or would you say it's still just the same, just outside, it doesn't get as much media?
Yeah, sexual assaults occur in a number of places, and we've taken reports within the Greek system, within the bar districts, within houses. So I wouldn't say that one is more prevalent than the other. Certainly when sexual assaults and alleged sexual assaults occur within the Greek system, it's certainly something that's very notable. And almost always a number of people are involved because of the housing situation in and of amongst themselves. The other thing that I think really brings a lot of attention is Kansas State in particular is unusual in that all the Greek houses are off campus, and that's unusual. Most campuses, that's not the way that it is. Yep. The Greek houses are on campus, they're officially sanctioned, and they're on school property. So there is absolutely no doubt what their status is as far as a school function. In Manhattan and through Kansas State University, it's different. The Greek houses are off campus. We are the primary responding agency, Raleigh County Police, by MOU, and Kansas State University Police is a secondary responding agency, which means that if a sexual assault occurs and we need to conduct an investigation, then RCPD is the primary agency. That means that we need to be then careful how we coordinate, like I talked about memorandum of understanding with the Title IX office. So I think one of the things that you see with Kansas State that may be different than other universities is this kind of nebulous, somewhat notion of what is the fraternity system as far as Kansas State University is concerned, since their facilities are off the university campus. Is that on-campus event, or is it an off-campus event? Is it a sanctioned event? Is it a non-sanctioned event? So I think that's a lot of what you're dealing with too. The other thing that complicates factors with fraternities and sororities is oftentimes they'll have events outside of their own facilities as well. And so there again, you deal with, is this a university sanctioned event or a non-university sanctioned event when it's occurring off their property.
Yeah. Okay.
I think kind of just to put a different spin on it, a lot of the research that I've seen does show that fraternity men are 3 times more likely to commit acts of sexual violence than other college men. And so I'm not hating on the Greek system, just those are just what a lot of the statistics do show. And I think I can't necessarily say why that is. I do think it has something to do with sort of the hyper masculinity of a lot of fraternities, and that sense of brotherhood kind of goes. I can see it very easily being a lot of cover-up situations because they don't want to get their buddy in trouble, things like that. And I think just sort of the way that the Greek system is sort of established, where the fraternities have the parties, and so it's sort of their turf, and they can do things like manipulate the drinks or situations like that. And so I think it's a lot of things. It's culture, like I mentioned, that sort of hyper masculine, toxic masculinity, as well as a group, like a sense of bonding and covering up for one another. And then I think also it's sort of viewed as more of a transactional occurrence in terms of how they view sexual relations with people. So I think that's definitely a great group to sort of have an engagement with on how to combat this issue, because again, it's more prominent. Because based on the research, it's not necessarily that all these frat brothers are running around raping people. It's that the ones who are doing it are doing it over and over again. And so talking to the other men about how to get them involved and how to be accountable for their organization and their brothers.
So do you think mainly it's more prominent in the fraternities because there could be a pressure system, and then if the pressure system worked in an opposite way, you think that it could stop happening as often?
I think it could, because sort of with any organization where there's a hierarchy, it would be if a young pledge or like a new brother sees an older brother doing something nefarious, and it's like anything else. It's difficult because it's this hierarchical system where you don't necessarily feel comfortable confronting them. So if we were to sort of flip the script, and if everyone were on the same page that sexual violence is very egregious and something that should not occur, then it might change. But I can't I can't really say the reason why it is that fraternity members are more likely to assault people. Yeah, so that's something that would be an interesting spot of research, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there any last minute things you would like to tell our listeners before we go off for this roundtable?
Just going back to one of the earlier comments, and that is, if you're going to go out and have a good time, go out and have a good time, have a plan, and stick with it.
And I would just like to say, just remind everyone, the C.A.R.E office is located in Holton Hall. So if anyone is ever in need of the services that we offer, please come on by. Or if you're we also do education and outreach. So if you're an organization looking for some more educational materials or presentations on any of these topics, you can reach out to us for that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming on here, and we really appreciate everything you guys have to say.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having us.